All right, thanks for having me. If I have not met you before, I am the Lanesboro Area Fisheries Supervisor. It's an office where I once started with the DNR back in 2007, and I kind of never left the area. I did have a position working on stream habitat projects for about 6 or 7 years where I think I figured I implemented or helped implement with Trout Unlimited over 50 miles of habitat projects. So I have some experience in that as well. But I'm now the supervisor down there, so more of now a fish management role. And one of our management tools is stocking, as you guys know. And so I wanted just to come here and provide you guys some information of like the history of stocking, where we've been, where we are right now, and then I kind of have some little tidbits of evaluation studies we're doing to kind of help guide where we're going. So a lot of efforts have gone into this presentation. People that have, gathered data in the past managers that made different management decisions through time. So it was really kind of neat to put this all together, and I'm excited to kind of share this information with you. It might be hard for some of you guys in the back to see, so I'll try to verbalize as much as I can. But if at any point, you want to distribute like a PDF of this presentation, I can provide that as well. So down in southeast Minnesota, my area is Fillmore, Houston, Winona, part of Olmsted counties. We're managing for 3 trout species, as hopefully you guys know. We have the rainbow trout on top, the brown trout in the middle, and the native southeast Minnesota brook trout. So it's kind of interesting. We use them each in, different goals that we have, and those have changed through time. And what has been effective during different times is now, it's just changing. What type of stream conditions we have, what our constituents are, and so I'm going to kind of, as I go through history, hopefully you guys learn, some of our goals, and then there's a lot more that goes into deciding where to stock than just going around each stream and plopping some fish here and plopping some fish there. We go through extensive evaluation kind of beforehand as well as after stocking. And then, we don't want to continue to just dump fish into a stream if we don't think we need it. So this is kind of just an interesting slide to, show that we're managing different species in the same stream. So this is Trout Valley Creek, which flows into the Whitewater area. Has a pretty good healthy brook trout population as well as brown trout. And you can see in this graph, if you can't see in the back, it's basically not kind of alternating. When the brook trout are doing better, the brown trout haven't been doing as well. And then when the brown trout are doing better, the brook trout aren't doing as well. So they're kind of alternating when they're doing better through time. And this graph goes all the way back to 1995. So a lot of the data we have is about 25 years of pretty solid data that's been collected either from the 90s or early 2000s. So just a little bit of our trout stocking history. I am the Lanesboro Hatchery Supervisor, went through all of our stocking records, and we have now an extensive history, which I'll show you graphs of, going all the way back to like the 1920s. Digging as far back as I could, it was really interesting to find that, they were once hauling stuff around on trains and in milk cans. And so now we're a lot more efficient in our stocking, where we have 3 cold water hatcheries down in southeast Minnesota. This is particular the Peterson hatchery, where we have our heritage strain brook trout. So we're definitely more efficient, where we don't have to be waiting at train stations to collect our milk cans of trout. We also no longer have to use horseback to get them and haul the milk cans around to put them in the streams. We have our fancy red stocking trucks with bulk tanks on the back and oxygen. And so we can ensure that all the, we rarely have any trout dying, and our trips are mostly about an hour. And so we're a lot more efficient on survivability from, getting the fish from the hatchery to actually getting them in the stream. Oh, sorry. You guys need a little X on the floor. I like to walk around. I'm going to be wandering every which way. Yeah. So, and now, what used to take 3 guys to stock a bucket of fish only takes 1 guy. So we've definitely gotten more efficient in our tools and our manpower. And since we're pretty low staffed, it's good that we only need one guy to carry the bucket. I just love that picture. Like, yeah, one. I mean, it had to have been staged, but you know, this is me over here pointing as the supervisor. Like, okay, this is exactly where you need to dump that bucket. All right, so now I'm going to go into the three species we have of trout, and I'm going to show you slides of the history, give you a few key moments of time where management decisions or different things changed the numbers that were stocked. So yeah, this one goes all the way back to 1923, and as I'm going through this, like I wasn't able to report what I don't have. So if there's gaps in data, it's just maybe the record keeping wasn't as good or I couldn't find stuff. But this is our brown trout yearling stocking, something that we're actually no longer doing. So you can see it kind of has this big peak, kind of really increased in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. In 1989, we shifted to more brown trout fingerlings. And by 2003, we actually ended stocking yearling brown trout. And it took a few years for that to be implemented. As managers, we need to request fish 2 years in advance because they have to know the numbers of the quota they need to raise the fish to then grow them and feed them. So it trickled out. I believe it was like 2001 that they decided to shift away from them. The goal of the yearling stocking is really to stock fish at catchable sizes. We also went to more of a wild strain of brown trout, and when they were stocking them as yearlings in the fall, hoping that by that spring there'd be a lot more fish for people to catch, they just weren't as easy to catch. Brown trout are a little more elusive, and so they ended up shifting more to rainbow trout yearling stocking, and we completely discontinued our yearling brown trout stocking. It just wasn't worth carrying them from fingerlings. If you don't know what a fingerling, it's about the size of your pinky, and a yearling's about like 9-10 inch fish. So it just wasn't worth keeping them on that extra time. So our brown trout fingerling stocking, here's the graph. Again, we start at 1921 on the left, goes all the way to 2025. Again, there was that kind of big shift in 1989 where you can see that big pulse where they increased, and they were also trying some fry stocking. So those are like itty bitty little babies, and we kind of went away from those, shifting more to fingerlings. You can see a drop in about 2003 where it almost like drops in half, and that's where they reduced the rate. At the same time, in the 90s, like our populations really started to do really well. 70s was pretty poor land use practices. Clean Water Act came in and stuff started to improve. And really in the 90s is when we see most of our trout populations in most of our streams kind of take off, especially brown trout. And so the reduction in stocking, we have a rate that we stock, whether the streams are, poor, medium, or good, and most kind of fell into that medium and good range. So we reduced our rate to that 1,500 per acre. I'll go back. And then what I'll talk about later is we have a brown trout natural reproduction program where we evaluate all of the streams that we're stocking fingerlings in, and we basically decide, is there still a need? And if there isn't, we discontinue. So in 2005, we discontinued 7 streams, and we reduced our numbers in 3 of those streams. So we want to be as efficient as we can. We don't want to spend money if we don't have to, but we still want to create opportunities for those populations. And here's kind of just a neat overlay of the yearling and fingerling. The yearlings are in blue, the fingerlings are in purple, so you can see that significant shift in the brown trout size that we were stocking. And then, we still get asked, so Iowa has completely discontinued brown trout stocking. Wisconsin has significantly decreased their stocking. The new policy change where if they have natural reproduction in a stream, they cannot stock it. I think it's more based on funding availability. And Um, we definitely have, if you can envision a stream that's 10 miles long and we have easements throughout it, you have the upper waters, typically smaller, more riffles, maybe available spawning habitat. Often our streams have really good natural reproduction on those upper ends. It's the lower ends where you have, the springs get more diluted with runoff water. Um, the the silt maybe settles out in that bigger water, but we still have good opportunities for fishing, angling. You can grow really big brown trout down there, and so those are kind of areas we're actually still continuing to stock those fingerlings. Can a fish that's up at mile 10 be hatched and then make it all the way down to the mouth of the river? Yes, it can. How often that happens? So we're still just trying to supplementally stock those lower areas to make sure that we have fish down there that can grow big and provide opportunities in those areas. So rainbow trout yearling stocking. Really the goal of these is to increase opportunities for anglers in and around towns. So we're stocking these. We have, when people settled in our area, they were settling in around water bodies, and we have streams down here. So many of our towns have a really nice trout stream running through them that can support multiple species. And so we're using these rainbows as stocking them as yearlings. We're stocking them throughout the summer months, starting before opener, going all the way through early part of September, really to increase opportunities for people to catch fish. I just love this slide that just kind of shows that, we have ponds, we have streams running through, and so that's kind of the goal of that program. It's very successful. It's very popular. I presented this talk in concert with the Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa group at the Driftless Symposium, if anybody was there, and both of those other states had the same sentiment that rainbow trout yearling stocking is very popular for people to catch fish. So we have 17 streams in our area alone, and then we have 3 park ponds that we're doing the stocking. And again, you can just kind of see that history and time where we really started increasing, in that early 2000s. And I'll get into brook trout stocking. This is something that's maybe of interest to the group. I've talked about our Minnesota Driftless, heritage strain brook trout before. This is the slide, and I think what's interesting about this is you can definitely see the different efforts in time on this graph. And again, I don't have what I don't have, but I feel it's pretty inclusive for the different times that we've put our efforts. The 1997, so this kind of last big bunch to the right was when we had the Minnesota wild strain of brook trout, which I'll show a graph of what they were made up of. Very popular, did really well, still doing well in many of our streams that we have. They were at the Crystal Springs hatchery, which received a flood, had to be depopulated because the hatchery got disease. So you could see that drop off in 2015. We no longer had brook trout to stock. In the meantime, we were kind of developing a new strain, which I'll talk about next. And so from 2023 to 2025, we've been stocking our new Minnesota Driftless brook trout. A little bit of history of how this was developed. And researchers back in early 2000s basically asked the question, brook trout being our only native trout species in southeast Minnesota, do we have any remnant native populations still in our area? There's been all those efforts, as you saw, of stocking. Many of those came from the East Coast. So really the only way to evaluate it is okay, let's go out and collect tissue samples. So you go out with a backpack shocker and sample places where we think there was brook trout, and we clip their adipose fin and collect that, and we have it tested for genetics. And since we don't have brook trout from whenever they were created, all we have is the known hatchery strains. So they were compared against known stock strain genetics. If they were related to that, it was assumed these populations are not native or not heritage. And And so here's kind of example of the jungles we got to go. And I got to help with this when I started in 2007, right when this was kind of in the middle of happening. I've waded through all sorts of things and yeah, it was really fun. And now it's really neat to kind of be a part of like now stocking this new strain we have. So here's the Brook Trout genetic results. It's a really hairy, scary tree-looking graph. All the little letters are an individual stream or one of those known stock strains. To make it easier, this clump are streams that are related to the known stock strains. All those orange, sorry, those are yellow. All those yellow circles are the known stock strains of the eastern coast brook trout. So all those kind of, as they branch out, they're related to that. These blue ones, not related to the red ones, and they kind of each have their own individual branch, so not really related to one another. These are the 3 genetic watersheds that we have down in our area. And this kind of includes the Lake City area as well. So we have the Zumbro River streams, Rush Creek watershed, and then the South Fork route. Then you see that other little green bit. That's the Minnesota Wild streams that we have recently stocked as well. And I say they got it half right because they had Coleridge Creek, which is in the blue, and then they had Spring Brook, which is in the red. So they had one of the streams that had kind of the native or heritage genetics. So now this is what the current strain at the Peterson hatchery is developed from. So we picked 3 different streams. The testing for this to be able to bring material into a hatchery is very rigorous and intense. And we had to basically test a stream to see if it's even like viable to be a natural source to take population, taking eggs and milk from. So we needed I think they wanted 50 pair, which they don't all spawn at the same time. So if you want 50 pair, 50 males, 50 females, you probably have to have a stream that has at least 100 of those in a stretch that we can collect them and survey them. We also have to do a lot of disease testing prior to that, sampling the fish to make sure they don't have any diseases before we bring that material. So ton of field work that went into this. So we have the 3 successful ones that we're working with now. This is kind of a neat visual of where all those lines go on a map. The gray meaning there was no brook trout there. The green was the heritage genetics that remained. You can see the bottom cluster in the middle. That's our South Fork watershed. North of that is the Rush watershed, and then the Zumbro watershed is up north. You can also see some random other green populations here and there. And some of those are actually like one time they went and transferred adults from one of those, like particularly the Rush Creek watershed, into that stream. And in 1 year they took off. And so it's interesting. Some of the ones like over on the east side are actually related to the Rush Creek watershed. And then this is a graph of the pink is where we're actually stocking and already have for 3 years. This next year we're going to new streams. So we're doing 3 years in a row, going to give it a break, and then go back and evaluate to see if they're doing their thing on their own or if we need to go back and kind of keep supplemental stocking. So we did a pretty good job geographically, as well as if you look, I kept those other dots on there for a reason. Some are streams that do not have trout in them. Brook trout would probably be the only thing that wants to be in this really cold water. We have some where we're going to stock on top of where we had stocked the Minnesota Wild in the past. And then also we're going to stock, or we already have, on top of the Eastern strain. And some of those ones where we're stocking on top of the Eastern strain, we're actually going to do follow-up genetic analysis to evaluate like which strain is winning. So we'll stock for 3 years, let them do their thing. All those babies we could then test, and you can actually kind of analyze like what of those have, you know, the Eastern stock strain genetics versus the new strain that we have. Pretty neat stuff. All right, so we also, in our management activities, we try to get to every stream every 20 to 30-ish years. Some we get to every 15 years, and some we do every year, depending on if we have easements or we're doing active management. This is an example of Money Creek, and this was one where we picked to stock. There was no brook trout up in this reach. There was no trout up in this reach. We stocked it, and then it just so happens that this last year was up for rotation to be evaluated to like update our management plan. It was on the rotation for every 20 years, let's say. And so we got to go back in there after we had already stocked the stream for 3 years. And I was pretty excited, nervous, like, okay, are there going to be brook trout in here? And when we got there, it looked like a flood had just come through, and like there was cobble everywhere and piles of rock that weren't there before. And I was like, oh my gosh, they all got washed away. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So this is the data. Before we do any stocking, we also take water temperature data, especially at a site where we don't have any brook trout. Is there no brook trout there because the conditions are poor, the water temperature is too high, like they won't survive here. So we do a lot of pre-data. So this was done in 2022. Then we stocked the strain in 23, 24, and 25. And here's what we saw when we went back and did the evaluation. This is what they call length frequency graph. The orange, this on the bottom axis is the length of fish. So the ones, the orange node on the left, that's your young of year, or your little guys, fingerlings. And then the green node is your 1-year-olds, and the purple is your 2-year-olds. And it's what you would expect. There's gonna be mortality as they get older, so there's that drop. But what's really neat is you see all 3-year classes and a pretty good sampling of them. And so that was really neat to see. I was pretty excited. What'll be interesting now is we're planning to go back. We'll wait till 28, 29, go back. We're going to stop stocking, and then, ideally we come back and we see those same nodes and they're just doing their own thing. This is my hands and a picture of those 3-year classes to kind of give you an idea of the sizes that, so those little fingerlings is about the size of my finger, 1-year-old, 2-year-old. Oh, it is gonna play. Maybe not. I don't know if you gotta hit play. There's a little video of me releasing the fish back into the, like on the bottom. Yeah. Nope. Anyway, it's a cool video. We took, someone let me put their phone underwater and send a. All right, so one other thing that I added, we also do sculpin stocking. This is not something that's new, but there's been a new effort that we've put forth on top of kind of this brook trout stocking. Hopefully people are familiar with these. They also love cold water. Our best score for fish index of biological integrity is a brook trout and a sculpin in the same stream. Sculpin are a native species. They love cold water. I know I found this picture today and I just was like over the moon. It's so cool. Not a brook trout, but that's okay. Love cold water, love rocky bottom streams. They hide. They got really flat bellies. You can see, go back to this last picture. They sit flat. They have their pectoral fins, their big fins that kind of hold them in place. They can angle them where the current just kind of keeps them in place. And they kind of like hop and scoot along the bottom. They have no swim bladder. They can't swim like a regular fish. They're a great bigger food source for trout. If you want to eat lettuce and salad every day of your life, you'll probably be good and skinny. And if you want to eat cheeseburgers, you might not be so skinny. So they want to eat cheeseburgers and get bigger. They were also likely extirpated from many streams, and for them to be able to find their way back through warmer water to get to that really upper cold water brook trout water, they just can't. So we're actually going out collecting them in streams that have a surplus of them, like you shock the bottom of the stream and the whole stream moves. And then we're doing direct transfers, again, 2 to 3 years, going back in, making sure they're doing all right, might add a few more. So that's really neat. I think the plan is then to see kind of how those stocking efforts help improve the brook trout populations. You know, their growth. Are they fatter because they've eaten cheeseburgers? So there's that. Cute little things. And that's like a monster. You get a 4-inch sculpin. That's like a 30-inch brown trout. All right, so now I'm going to go into some of like our evaluation of, I kind of gave you a history of some of the things we've done and now what we're doing, and then just a little bit more information of like how do we kind of make these management decisions of whether we discontinue a stream. So this is our brown trout natural reproduction check program. We basically go along the edges of streams where we think the little babies would be, and we do it like in May, about when we can first start seeing them. They're usually inch and a half long, and we count and compare across years. This is our current list of where we are stocking our brown trout fingerlings. Don't really need to pay attention to the streams. You can. But for example, we have 3 streams that have the green star. Those are the ones that we just they ended the program in 2024. So we collect data for a certain amount of years, and then we decide should we continue stocking or not. And then Thompson Creek and Winnebago are the new ones that we just started this last year. This is the data from all streams. Those programs started in 1997. The black line is the control sites, which they have 7 streams. So we have 7 streams that we do every single year, never changes. Same spot, same stream every year. So we know our trout populations fluctuate. A lot of it is tied to year class strength. You could have a flood. If you had a flood right now, you could wipe out a whole year class in some of these streams. It's really a vulnerable time when they're really itty bitty. They cannot avoid floodwaters. Other things can come along and wipe out a year class too, but that's kind of our way to gauge, like, should the population be good this year or not. The green is then the study sites, and those change every time. Again, a stream might be in the program for 3 to 5 years, and so that green line it's a bunch of different mix of the 21 different study sites that we've done. Some have graduated out of the program. They found the track well with the control sites, and some stay in it because we just realized they still need the help not keeping up. This is another graph, and this is getting kind of hairy, but it's just kind of to show that point I just made where some years we just have really poor year class strength. And the graph on top is our long-term monitoring sites. We have 11 streams that we sample every year for trout populations, and this is particularly our young of year. So we pull out the little guys and just do an evaluation or create a number for them. And so you can see those blue lines are where those years, and they pretty well tie with big flood event years where we had a lot of rain, particularly a lot of spring flooding. So you can, again, just some years you just lose that year class. Oftentimes after that, you'll see a rebound. The next 1-2 years, you'll see the population skyrocket. That niche space is available for the little guys to not compete with last year's year class. Here's an example. I can't see what stream it is. Weisel Creek. This was one that we ended the program, but it shows you those last 3 years. Obviously, it had previously been in the program, just underperforming. So Weisel's in the blue. The control sites are in the dotted orange. Underperforming. I don't know what happened that one year where it did really well. But again, just overall, and we kind of have a metric that we use. If it's still less than 30% of the control, we feel like we should still stock. We've done a lot of habitat projects on Weisel. The reach we're stocking is just poor for natural reproduction. We're just going to continue to stock there to kind of boost those project areas. And then this is Dushy Creek, also one that we just ended. And this one, again, it's actually tracking well. Where we were doing our sampling actually is now where we're stocking brook trout. And Dushy is unique where the upper part is cold, brook trout water. We're now stocking brook trout there. Don't want to be stocking then browns on top of those. In the middle, it just kind of gets marginal, moderate water, trout water. And then we have the hatchery further down where bigger springs are coming in and it gets cold again. So we just shifted our brown trout stocking more to that middle area. We have a ton of easements almost the whole way. So just want to continue to make sure there's enough recruitment there. And now that we're switching to brook trout up top, kind of filling in that middle area. So a couple examples of, here's the data you have. Now what do you do as a manager to do you keep stocking, discontinue, or shift your efforts? And like I said, we have discontinued stocking in some of our streams where we just feel like we don't need to be doing it. So this is another project that actually the hatchery manager and I were sitting around kind of chatting about some of our brown trout fingerling stocking efforts and kind of this idea of okay, we know there's years where we have really poor year class, but then we know there's years where they do super well. And again, if we're stocking, let's say Dushy Creek, and I ask for 8,000 fingerlings every year, I don't know 2 years from now whether we're going to have a good year or a poor year. We're just going to keep stocking 8,000 every year because we know Dushy Creek needs it. And so we kind of came up with this idea of evaluating our stocking efforts and then comparing it to the year class strength. And hopefully that makes sense. So Winnebago Creek, this is the plan. Winnebago Creek, as I already said, is in our natural reproduction check stocking program. I'm getting cotton mouth. Which means, again, we go out in May. We're evaluating that year class, how strong it is. We have 2 stations we're doing, because then you can kind of average them, depending on if the habitat is shifted. And then in late May, after we've done our natural reproduction check to see is that year class going to be a strong one or a poor one, then we're going in and we're stocking our 8,000 brown trout, and we're clipping the adipose fin, so we know which ones are stocked. And we just evaluated this last spring. So then the following spring, because this is a spring station, the following spring we give them a chance to survive and do their thing. We go back and evaluate, and we can compare. So the stocked fingerling is on the left, and it's hard to see. The adipose is missing. And then the natural reproduction one is on the right. And then we can kind of basically look at percent of which ones did better in that particular year class. So this is the natural reproduction check kind of data that we've already collected for Winnebago. We had one poorer year class that tracked with the controls. Winnebago's in blue. And then we had a better year class. And that's what I really want to see during this 5-year evaluation study. We're stocking these 8,000 fingerlings every year. I want to have year classes that are poor, and I want to have year classes that are high, and then see kind of who wins in our efforts. And this is just showing the graph. The natural reproduction check is now in green on the far left, or far right, sorry. And then we also have, this is one of our long-term monitoring sites where we're evaluating the population every year. That's the blue and orange now. And the fact that the scale is different, it's a slightly different evaluation we're doing, where the natural reproduction checks, we're just going along the edge where we think the little guys would be. Whereas the long-term monitoring site, we're shocking the whole entire stream. But it just kind of shows you we do have opportunities to get fluctuation in our population. So here's what that, here's the clipped versus the not clipped. The natural young of year are in the green, and the stocked fingerlings are in orange, slightly bigger, which we'd expect when we stock them. They are usually bigger than what we'd see naturally in a stream. The hatchery is feeding them every day, and kind of they get a jump start on spawning, so they're typically bigger than the natural ones, which we see in the average size. Natural was 5.3 inches, stocked was 5.7. But the percent of total, and again, there was a pretty good year class, The natural is 68% of the population of young a year, and the stocked were 32%. So here's kind of my potential scenarios in 2026, where the young of year is really strong class. We saw that first year where it was like, okay, now this year there's a really good year class. So this spring when we go back out, you know, there's a couple scenarios that I can envision in my brain. So one would be the natural young a year just wins. They're natural to the stream. They're not being raised in a raceway, feeding little pellets. Like they kind of already know how to do their thing. And the stocked ones just don't contribute, which kind of alludes to like on a really good year class year, we probably shouldn't be stocking the stream. It's a waste of time. Scenario 2 is that the stocked fish, when you're throwing them on top of an already good year class, kind of outcompetes, maybe because of size, or the natural young year just, you know, they kind of are competing with one another for, again, that space that's available, food that's available, and so they kind of both get knocked back because there's more competition. So that's kind of stuff I wanna see and evaluate. Still to be determined what we kind of find there. Again, I'm hoping for variability in natural streams. The spring floods, rain events can really impact our year classes, and so kind of my thought is, you know, can stocking, when we know floods come through and wipe out a year class, maybe those are the years that we want to focus efforts stocking our streams, and then on maybe years where there's really good natural reproduction, we always have like bigger rivers that we could stock. And again, having to predict where we're going to go in 2 years is pretty challenging as a manager, but doing kind of more of like adaptive stocking approach. Oh goodness, that slide didn't show up. There was a list of streams, but we kind of have like just basically what I was saying, request a certain number of fingerlings, and then as we do our natural reproduction checks right away in the spring, or if we track where watersheds got hit and where year classes might have gotten wiped out, we could do a little bit more adaptive stocking approach than just continuing to stock, you know, our 8,000 fish every year. That's all I got. I probably talked super fast as normal. Oh, good amount of time. So yeah, I am always available, phone, email. That booklet has our Lanesboro email in the front page if I check that as well. So if anybody ever has any follow-up questions, where should I go fishing? Like, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We are there to help. You are our constituents, or you're one of them, and we like to support anglers, and we want them to have the best opportunities down here. And we know our streams pretty well. So always feel free to reach out to us. You're not bothering us. Yeah. I think we have time for questions. Or are you doing the...
I have two questions here that I asked Melissa to prepare. I have two questions here that I asked Melissa to prepare just to see who's paying attention, and I've got some prizes for in-person audience. So the first question is, what stream have we already evaluated Minnesota Driftless Brook Trout stocking efforts? Somebody know the answer to that question? Yes, back there? No. That's okay. So anybody else? No. No. Who? Okay. Who said that? Okay. Come and pick your hat.
One out of the 6 wasn't
Green or 10? Green. Thank you. Okay. The next question, and you got to raise your hand because if 3 people said it at the same time, I don't know who to give the hat to, and I don't want to get in trouble. Okay. What's the main goal for the DNR fishery to stock rainbow trout yearling? Do you know the answer? Raise your hand. Oh, there was somebody back there first. Yeah, is that Yep, that's correct answer. Okay. Okay, so now we'll take some questions if you have any questions. And Brad, you said you would help me go around with the microphone, right? Where's Brad?
Hello. Oh, I like this one.
Okay, so Brad, like somebody raise their hand, give them the microphone so they can ask the question. Melissa will answer.
There's one back. Yep.
You mentioned a statistic there about fish per acre. Do you measure that by like acre of surface water, or is it acre of like watershed stream? Does that include riparian areas, or how is that statistic derived?
Yeah, the first one. So we do a length of the stream. You know, if we're talking about like brook trout, we're stocking 1,500 per acre. We we know, where the good water is. We'll take a length of that stream where we think the brook trout would do well, and then average width, and get our acreage. And then usually fudge it up or down depending on, if it's like 3,920, we'll just bump it up to 4,000. But yep.
Melissa, going back to the brook trout, what were the three streams that you're using right now to collect the fish for the heritage or for the new brook trout strain?
Yeah, it was Middle Creek, East Indian, and Sweet Bottom. Sweet Bottom is one of those where they did a direct transfer from Hemingway in, I believe, 1981. One time direct transfer, and they took off. And it has pretty good, healthy numbers of adults. Um, and kind of a unique, it's like a really short, cold stream, so we don't really see too many browns moving up in there.
Not to minimalize the presentation to just dollars, but is there any numbers as to like what does it cost to rear a fingerling or one of the fish
That's
that
a
are
good
being
question that I should know, but I do not. Yeah, that'd be something good to add to this presentation. Thank you.
Have the answer, send it to me and I'll.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll figure it out, and I got connections, so. I love tough questions, and I always like getting back to people. I don't ever want to leave people like, I don't know, and then good luck, figure it out on your own.
Question for you regarding northern strains in the North Shore, brook trout versus the driftless area. Has anybody compared those two strains to see what opportunities are or not?
Yeah, they have done some genetics work up there. I do not know what their results are in particular. But these, it's Minnesota Driftless is the name of the strain at the Peterson hatchery. They are being used statewide, so any offices can request them. We're requesting about 100,000 fingerlings a year just for our area. I know Lake City's stocking some, Twin Cities. So, Little Falls, I even believe Duluth is. So I think it's pretty unique strain that we have.
Yeah, Melissa, I had a question. It has to do with any sort of, let's see, stream restoration, work that's actually done to improve stream habitat and all that. How does that inform your sampling and comparative work?
Oh, it's really hard to hear with the music going. Could you repeat part of that?
Yeah, it just had to do with any stream repair work or any sort of restoration work that happens, along stream courses for streams that you're managing. Does that say, well, they're doing a lot of work there, we won't actually sample that stream for X number of years to see if it takes, estimate the populations, or does it affect?
We used to do when I'd first started, we actually had habitat projects that had been completed that we sampled every year, and we did a control site. We haven't been doing as much of that. We do have some of our long-term monitoring sites that have had habitat projects done in the past. The problem with evaluating habitat projects, as that graph showed, when you're going up and down in your trout populations, like what if you just get it on a really good year? So we've done analysis of like how long it would take, how many years pre and post project would you need to sample a stream before you could see if the project improved it or wasn't, and it was 10 years before and 10 years after. That's a lot of work to kind of answer one question. We do have, and I know you didn't really ask about evaluation habitat projects, our kind of rotating schedule. We don't really, if a project was done, maybe we delay it so that we're not in there when they're monkeying around with it. But when we go back to each stream and do these evaluations every 20 to 30 years, we go to different stations throughout the stream. So that'd be neat. Like if we had some not in a habitat project, some in. We also have back years of data. And again, you're comparing maybe one sampling done in 2000 to one done in 2025. But we do have a new project that's in the works right now. And it's going to be on Beaver Creek in Whitewater area. Where we are going to be doing 2 different habitat type projects on the same stream. And we have pit tag arrays already in place, which if you don't know what a pit tag is, it's a little microchip bead that we implant into individual fish. We implant it where they were captured, release them back where they were captured, and then we have these arrays where they swim through and we can see whether they're leaving a site, moving up downstream. And so we're actually going to be we'll have control sites in between these project reaches. So we'll have spots where we don't do anything to the stream. We're going to do a traditional habitat project, what we call traditional, using rock as more of our stabilizing feature, and then have some additional control sites. And then we're having a more natural reproduction, wood, tow wood, re-meandering the channel, actually moving the channel what the pattern we want it to be. And then again, we have these pit tag arrays in between all of those different stations. And it'll be really neat to see, we get the question, do these projects, like, do fish are attracted to them? Or maybe we're repelling fish, different size fish, bigger fish maybe want to come to the deeper pools and little guys stay up into the upper waters. So we think construction will maybe happen like 2028. We're still in the really early stages of planning and doing pre-movement studies. So fish are obviously going to move now based on if they're trying to spawn or moving out of, once they're little babies, they're going to maybe move into bigger water as they grow. So we're already tracking movement before we do the study. We're going to do the study, track it, post project, and hopefully get an idea of those evaluations, which I'm really excited about. It's a pretty neat project. It'll have a really, you're tracking individual fish. And TU is going to be putting in for Lessard funding for that, so they'll be a partner on that, and I think it'll be a really great project.
Melissa,
So-
which species is easiest to raise? Which has maybe more diseases? Which grows the fastest?
You're asking me a lot of hatchery manager. I'm a stream manager. I do know the first year they had the brook trout at the Peterson hatchery. Again, we've been requesting about 100,000 every year. The first year we got 41,000, and it was due to disease. They just hadn't figured out. Each species kind of does have their little picky things that they like or don't like, flow rates or feed size or different diseases they're susceptible to. So there was little growing pains that first few years, and now they're like max production where they're like, we got extras. Where do you want to put them? So I think rainbows are pretty easy. They seem to just be happy in the ponds outside. But I would assume maybe the browns would grow faster, but maybe the rainbows. I don't know. I'll have to get back to you. Depends what you feed them. Lettuce or cheeseburgers. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, one of the pieces of information was Iowa has stopped stocking brown trout. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how can they get away with that when supposedly their water is a little bit warmer? Or that's what's been discussed, that Minnesota had, better trout water, a little colder generally than Iowa. That was one thing. What is their thinking?
Again, I do feel we've obviously reduced our stocking a lot. And some of the places we're still putting them, we're kind of hopeful that they grow into adults. It's again more that moderate, bigger water. Part of me is like, yeah, we probably could discontinue brown trout stocking. Ever since the 90s, those guys have just taken off and they reproduce like bunnies and they seem to be doing pretty fine. As I'm not 100% sure all the reasoning behind Iowa's discontinuing, but they just felt that it wasn't needed, I guess, for what they were getting out of it. I don't know.
Another thing, two questions, but I think there was something about feral trout, or they were hatching trout that were taken. Their predecessors were taken directly from a stream. They're supposed to be wild fish, and that those were doing better. Now I don't remember exactly where, but I thought that was discussed recently. Do you know anything about that? That kind of.
Yeah, most states have shifted more to the feral brown trout than the.
Is that what
What's the other
does?
term? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
That's kind of what I said when they switched to that strain that was more feral. That's where it was like they weren't as catchable. So when we were raising them all the way to yearlings, you weren't really getting, the goal of the rainbow yearlings is put and take. You're putting them in there for people to catch. And it really wasn't doing that. We were just stocking bigger wild trout that probably would have done all right if we had stocked them as fingerlings. You guys got good questions. Sorry.
I just had a question about one of the graphs that was shown. It had the four blue lines that kind of showed the growth and decline of certain trout. And in 2013, it looked like there was a sharper decline in all the species. And I was wondering about what caused that decline, or if you know why.
Yeah, it was a really wet year. The reason I don't have a blue line is in there because we didn't have the natural reproduction check program going on at the time. They had staff changing. The guy that was in charge of it left and went and worked at the Peterson hatchery, so there was a lag, and then you see that lag again during COVID time. So there's probably a blue line there. I would envision that natural reproduction checks would have been poor as well. But yeah, really, really wet year. It shows up on a lot of we have streams. These are, again, our long-term monitoring streams that we have fish data for. We also have hydrology, so flood or water level data. We have temp data. And the PCA also has some other parameters. And 2013 definitely stands out as like a big wet event year. So multiple events during that year. Yep.
Over the years, have you noticed any differences in temperatures of the streams?
Yes, yes. Yeah, our streams are getting colder in the last, I would say, 15 to 20 years. Pretty much about when I showed up, they really started improving. I think we have attributed it to better land use practices. Although we're not perfect down there, you know, there's a lot more grassed waterways, contour, you know, fields, and also all these big rain events that we've all know have been happening in the last 15, 20 years. I heard a PCA gal who works on our kind of a hydrology side of things. She said our pipes are full. And if you think of down in southeast Minnesota with our karst topography and our underground channels, it's like a big plumbing system where we got sinkholes, you got springs, you got different layers of pipes and karst. Our pipes are full. A lot of our groundwater layers, you know, our old aquifers, all the way up to the ones that, you know, only take, you know, a year for something to get from point A to point B. A lot of them are like all full. So seeing an increase in springs, increase in spring flow. There's places that were dry runs when I started, they're now flowing perennially. So we're in really good times for water conditions. And then that's, you know, during the summertime, our streams are colder, and in the wintertime, they'd be warmer. So, which is kind of, you know, backwards of like climate change, and everything's doom and gloom, where you have that spring groundwater is acting more as a buffer for the increased air temperatures.
Chris, you want to go ahead and do some of the questions online?
Yeah. Yeah, we've got a number of them here. First question was, this was from earlier in the presentation. What were the 7 streams discontinued from brown trout stocking? Putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, do I want a hat? I'd have to get back to you.
Okay.
I could, yeah, I don't want to try to guess.
Another one, you had a slide up about Money Creek, and it said brook trout stocking in 2025, and then brown trout in 2024 and 2023. Is that accurate, or would it have been all brook trout in those years?
This one or this one?
It was the one with the white background.
Maybe it was the previous.
Yeah.
Previous? This one?
No, the first one you asked. That one.
Oh yeah, that says brown trout. Whoopsie.
Okay, but those are actually all brook trout.
Correct.
Okay.
You win a hat. I'll ship it to you.
We got some people paying a lot of attention here, so that's
Yeah,
good.
no, yeah, that's yeah, those should all be brook trout. We only got like 2 browns in the whole sampling, which is really neat. And they were both little yearlings, which you'd expect kind of in that smaller water.
All right. Here's a question for you, Melissa. What do you fish, and what is your favorite creek or river to fish?
I do fish. I actually learned to fly fish a couple years ago. I didn't give my normal slide of where I'm from. I'm from east side of St. Paul, Oakdale originally. Grew up fishing at my mom's side of the family cabin where she grew up with her 3 sisters up by Cromwell. So I was a walleye fisher lady at heart growing up. You couldn't keep me off the dock. Loved anything to do with water. It's unique now that I live down where we don't have any natural lakes and I work with trout. But I kind of like that, you know, I have a passion, a work passion, and then I love to get in my boat and zoom around and still fish for walleyes and crappies and other things. But if I get out, I have two little young boys that I don't get to get out as often. But if I ditch out at work a couple hours early, I actually usually head down to the Root River. We've been doing a lot of sampling, anywhere from Lanesboro down to Rushford in the last 5 years. And if you want to catch big trout, fish big water. So we also have really decent population of smallmouth bass, walleyes. I love fishing for suckers in the spring. I'll be on the river come April. But yeah, I'll fish for anything. I'm a really competitive person. If you gave me a pole and said go catch this, I would keep going until I did.
It's electric.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's the problem with trout fishing. So you go out and, you know, sample a stream, and then you go back and try to fish it. You're like, I know there's fish here. What is going on? And again, I'm competitive, so it's happier that I go where I haven't sampled. And I'm like, oh, there's just no fish here. That's why I'm not catching any. For whatever reason, I love Winnebago Creek. I think I like the upper where it comes out of the spring. If you haven't been up to Camp Winnebago Springs, really neat area. That's where kind of that sampling station we have is just down from that. Quickly turns into like decent sized water with decent sized depth. Can get some big trout. I think the valley is just unique. So that's probably my favorite stream to go to for work if I had to pick one.
All right. Question here about sculpin stocking. Wondering when did you start the sculpin program, and do you have any results to show that the transplants are taking hold?
Yeah, we don't have any data yet. Again, there's been different efforts in time. I wish I had more time to pull that together. It was an idea I had. This weekend, I literally made those slides this morning. Takes forever to find a picture. Like I know this picture exists, I just can't find it. But we've done different efforts in time. There are also two different species of sculpin. We have mottled sculpin, likes more of the marginal warmish trout water. Slimy sculpin, like the colder water. It's really hard to tell a difference between them. So we also have another study that's gone on where we're continuing to do. Anytime we're going around to these like 25 to 30 year rotations of our streams, we're always looking for sculpin. And if we find it, we have our vials with our ethanol. We're taking fin clips and they're testing for genetics to see. It's just easier to see what species. And then we're also finding there's like same sort of genetic clusters like we did the brook trout. So if these sculpin were once extirpated, they're still hanging on. We're finding kind of that like geographically close streams are related kind of to one another in those sculpin populations too. With that, now that we're stocking, so it's kind of different than stocking efforts in the past, we're trying to take from more local streams. So if you had A, B, and C stream kind of all in a row along the Root River, B has really good numbers of sculpin, and you want to repopulate A and C, but you also have D way up here, like we're going to pick from B. So we're trying to keep our stocking efforts more local, where we're kind of boosting that genetic, if that answers your question. But yeah, I'd love to kind of deep dive into the history of that. It's kind of an ongoing study that eventually there's going to be some kind of publications and findings of what we're doing there. But
All right.
love this group because I get really good educated questions. You guys are great.
There's a question here about who can I contact about possible stream bank stabilization and restoration?
Myself, or we have a new, I don't know if anybody knew Jim Melander. I think he presented maybe here about kind of his historic career with the DNR. He retired last spring. So we have a new habitat supervisor. So we have our own crew that does projects along stream banks. They're really starting to target, we've had landowners that have sold us an easement, and they've had an easement maybe there for 30, 40 years, and they just have issues with like two banks that keep eroding into their property. And so they're trying to get more bang for their buck instead of doing longer projects that TU is very successful in getting funding for and executing. They're trying to target more of these smaller landowners, helping them out, kind of, spreading out the wealth of the projects happening. So either myself or Dustin Hoffman is our stream habitat specialist, the position I used to have. He's the liaison between Trout Unlimited and the DNR on any stream habitat projects. So I guess it depends on if it's a individual landowner, smaller type project, I would contact our office, or Alan Perochka is the new habitat supervisor there. But if it's a bigger idea, if you're not familiar with the process for Trout Unlimited, getting streams on the list to Lessard, they come from myself for our Lanesboro area. So we basically give TU a list of streams. It's very lengthy, and a lot of thought has gone into those where they're like, these are shovel ready. Other ones maybe lower on the priority, like we'd really like to secure an additional walk-in so that we have access on the upstream end and downstream end. So we always welcome new ideas for project sites, because it's kind of hard to, think of everything. So you got options, I guess.
Great, thank you. Question about bar charts that you showed for the number of brown, brook, and rainbow trout stocked. Are those just for the Lanesboro hatchery, or are those numbers for all stat hatcheries statewide?
Those would be all hatcheries, but only for the Lanesboro area streams.
Okay.
Lake City has their own, yeah. We have a program that tracks all of our stocking efforts. And when I showed up as a manager, I'm like, why do these only go back to, I think it was like 1987-ish or 80, somewhere in the 80s. And it really bothered me that I know there's more stocking before that. And so I dug through every single paper file. And this was kind of during the COVID when most people were working from home. You could be in the office. So I dug through every single paper file, and then our hatchery manager had boxes of like pink slips, which anytime they did delivery, like truck driver type stuff, they had these slips for what was stocked where, and he went through like 3 boxes of those. And I think my spreadsheet had over 700 new entries that we then uploaded into that program. So Lanesboro area, Lake City did the same thing as well, but we have way more extensive history in this program. I always like to think of, like, if something happens to me tomorrow, the next manager, how would they pick up with, the data that you left them? And so a lot of my goals have been like data retention, all those like neat graphs you saw visually of where we're stocking, or our genetic stuff. I've been doing a lot of like GIS mapping to just try to preserve those locations. It's hard for streams that have river miles or so-and-so's farm that then so-and-so sells. So like actually having like maps, data, spreadsheets, that's kind of my jam. So good question.
All right, last question here. What is the biggest surprise you have had in your current job?
Ooh. Kind of how fun management can be, or like how many decisions I can just make. I first started back when I was just a lowly specialist. It was like you were just told, okay, we're sampling this stream today, and this is what we're doing, and You kind of went about your work, did your job, turned in your reports, went home and came back the next day and, just rinse, wash, repeat. Now that I am where I am, it's like, oh, that's why we were collecting this data. Or like, this is why this information was useful, because you need to figure out where you want to stock 2 years from now. And then, having the conversation with my boss, like, okay, so like, could I just discontinue brown trout stocking? Yeah, I could. I could tomorrow say, we're done. I'll get a lot of questions and I better have some information as to why. But so like it's just kind of neat. Like, I am a manager of these streams. I take it very seriously. I love my job. I love, how excited folks like yourself are about these resources. So it motivates me. Like those slides with the people catching the rainbow trout yearlings. You go out to those events where you see people enjoying the resource that we've kind of helped build. I get really a lot of joy out of that. And so I take pride in the decisions I make. And that's kind of the goal of presenting some of this information for you guys today, is there's, I think, maybe different perceptions on what goes into decisions for stocking. But I hope you leave with, there's a lot goes into, a lot of decisions go into the stocking efforts and other management activities. And this is just kind of one of those. Any more?
I actually had one more just come in, wondering if the DNR makes public its annual spending on stream trout hatchery program, and if so, where could we find that information?
I'm not sure about.
Sure.
I do know, I've learned that, I think there was an article done that I had to provide some comments about the trout stamp. And, the trout stamp goes into more pots of money than I thought. I think people just think it's meant for just the hatcheries and the trout stocking efforts. But some of that money goes into other efforts, such as pursuing easements, and some other different pots. So it's not all about just raising the stocking trout for the trout stamp. Yeah, I don't have numbers on hatchery stuff.
Okay, Chris, is that it online?
Yeah, I think that's online. I think we're good to go. Thank you so much. There's great answers.
We grilled you a lot tonight.
I'm sweating.
Questions. So we don't want to stay here for too long, since they're going to kick us out in about half hour. But Melissa, thank you so much for coming and presenting today.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Just skip that. Okay, thank you everybody for coming tonight. I think it was a great presentation. I'm actually going in your area tomorrow and Wednesday, so maybe I'll call you, finding out where to go. And so I'm retired now, so I try to fish during the week versus going fishing during the weekend. So, well, thank you very much, everybody, for showing up. Make sure you pay your bill before leaving, because I don't want to end up with your bill. And drive safely, and we'll see you. Next meeting will be at in Eden Prairie, always the fourth Monday of every month. So April, I don't know what date it is, but the fourth Monday in April, this is our next meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Drive safe. Have a good evening.